I don't think that we can ever have peace with my family unless the truth is out there.
For Prince Harry, the financial pressure didn't arrive with a bang. It crept in quietly, stacking itself year after year until it became impossible to ignore. What now circulates as a reported $100 million burden isn't the result of reckless splurging or a single bad bet. It's the outcome of a life rebuilt on projections instead of guarantees. After stepping away from royal duties, Harry entered a world where attention had to be monetized to survive. Media deals were struck during a moment when public curiosity felt endless. Streaming platforms, publishers, and production partners lined up, expecting a steady stream of content fueled by royal proximity and insider appeal. Those contracts came wrapped in optimism, but they were also rigid, demanding, and unforgiving. Creativity slowed. Projects stalled. Yet the financial expectations never did. Security became another unrelenting weight. As a working royal, protection was institutional, automatic, absorbed by the system. As a private citizen with a globally recognizable face, security became personal, expensive, and non-negotiable. Year after year, those costs reportedly climbed into staggering territory. There was no way around them, no scaling back without risking safety. Freedom, it turned out, came with a monthly bill few could imagine. Charitable commitments added further strain. Many initiatives were launched with genuine intent and bold promises, often assuming future earnings would comfortably support them. But charity, no matter how noble, requires consistent funding. When income fluctuates and expenses remain fixed, good intentions can turn into financial liabilities. What once felt inspiring can quietly become suffocating. The deeper issue wasn't scandal. It was structure. Harry built a life where income depended on momentum, media relevance, public interest, brand alignment, while expenses were fixed, rising, and relentless. Some years delivered. Others didn't. But the bills never paused. For someone raised inside a system designed to absorb shock, this shift was seismic. Advisors, protocols, and institutional buffers once softened every fall. Now, every miscalculation landed directly on Harry himself. Friends describe long nights spent revisiting numbers, not in panic, but in sobering realization. This wasn't about undoing the past. It was about making survival sustainable. Meghan, often described as pragmatic and forward-thinking, became deeply involved in reassessing priorities. Which projects still made sense? Which drained more than they gave back? Which commitments were built for long-term stability, and which belonged to a moment that had already passed? These weren't glamorous conversations. They were necessary ones. The irony is sharp. The move away from royal life was meant to bring control, independence, autonomy. Yet independence comes without safety nets. The quiet certainty that core needs would always be met vanished the moment the system was left behind. What remained was freedom paired with arithmetic, ambition forced to negotiate with reality. As pressure mounted, another reality became impossible to ignore. The palace was not coming to the rescue. Reports suggest that King Charles and Prince William made a deliberate decision to stand back. No public statement. No private bailout. Just distance. To some, it looked like cruelty. To others, principle. Within royal thinking, stepping in would blur lines that had already been publicly drawn. Independence, once claimed, would now have consequences. For Harry, that realization landed hard. He had prepared for emotional distance, strained relationships, and cold headlines, but not for the total absence of a financial backstop. The institution that once absorbed risk had closed its doors completely. This wasn't disgrace. It was reckoning. A prince raised inside certainty, now navigating exposure. A bold exit reframed as a long endurance test. Not a fall from grace, but a confrontation with numbers that don't bend for history, titles, or intention. And beneath it all, a deeper question began to take shape, one that money alone could never answer. How much of this was about finances, and how much was about loyalty, accountability, and the price of walking away? Money has a way of exposing fractures that emotions alone can hide. And inside the House of Windsor, finances have quietly become the sharpest fault line of all. On the surface, the idea feels absurd. One of the wealthiest families on earth arguing over money? Yet behind the grandeur, money in royal life has never been just currency. It's leverage, it's approval, it's belonging. And once Prince Harry stepped away from royal duty, all three began to slip from his grasp. According to royal accounts, the turning point came shortly after Harry and Meghan formally exited their roles. Queen Elizabeth II, attempting to stabilize an already volatile situation, reportedly asked then Prince Charles to manage communication with Harry directly. It was meant to simplify matters, to keep the conversation contained and respectful. Instead, it intensified everything. As discussions unfolded, tensions reportedly sharpened. Harry, feeling cut off and increasingly exposed, is said to have pressed for continued financial support. From his perspective, the departure was about safety and survival, not exile. But from Charles's side, the line had already been crossed. The reported response, short, blunt, unforgettable, "I'm not a bank," became symbolic of a much deeper shift. Harry has fiercely rejected that version of events, calling it fiction. And publicly, there's no document, no recording, no proof. But in royal culture, truth often lives in pattern rather than paperwork. What followed mattered more than what was said. The money stopped. Not dramatically, not cruelly, just cleanly. Charles continued to support Harry for a limited time during the transition, but once the terms were finalized, the tap was turned off. No extensions, no exceptions, no quiet reversals. The message was clear. Stepping away from royal service meant stepping away from royal funding. If that boundary hurt Harry, the reaction from Prince William cut even deeper. Sources close to the future king describe a resentment that has hardened over time. William's anger isn't framed as jealousy or rivalry, it's moral. In his eyes, Harry didn't just leave the system. He monetized it. He built a new life funded by the very institution he publicly criticized. To William, that crossed an unforgivable line. Royal duty, as William sees it, is built on restraint. You serve quietly, you benefit quietly. You don't cash out and then burn the house down on your way out. This belief has reportedly shaped William's stance on money more than anything else. He is said to support strict financial boundaries, not out of punishment, but principle. If royal privilege comes with responsibility, then walking away means forfeiting both. Insiders suggest William has already made his intentions clear for the future. When he becomes king, financial support for Harry will not resume. Inheritances, allowances, informal assistance, everything will be locked behind the same rule. No role, no funding. Harry, of course, has already received substantial wealth. Millions from Princess Diana. Additional funds from trusts connected to the Queen Mother. From William's perspective, that should have been enough. Anything more, he believes, sends the wrong message, not just to Harry, but to the public watching closely. What makes this rift so volatile is what money represents beneath the surface. For Harry, financial backing symbolized continued connection. Proof that despite everything, he still belonged. For William and Charles, withholding support became a way to enforce clarity. Not rejection, but separation. Families fight over many things, but money turns emotion into policy. Once numbers are involved, feelings harden into rules. And while there were brief flickers of hope, a private meeting between Harry and King Charles in late 2025, quiet conversations meant to thaw the ice. The core issue remained untouched. Reconciliation without financial dependency. Relationship without rescue. Behind palace walls, advisors reportedly warned against any move that looked like a bailout. Helping Harry now, they argued, wouldn't just solve a personal problem. It would rewrite precedent. Independence would become optional. Boundaries would blur. The institution, already under modern pressure, could not afford that weakness. So the palace chose restraint. No press conference. No clarification. No denial. Just silence. And in royal language, silence is rarely empty. It is deliberate. It allows stories to run without confirmation while avoiding direct engagement. It starves controversy without feeding it. And in this case, it did something else too. It quietly confirmed that the reports weren't entirely wrong. The $100 million figure was never challenged, never laughed off, never corrected. Inside the palace, that absence spoke volumes. For Harry, the message was unmistakable. Whatever emotional bonds remained, the financial chapter was closed. There would be no institutional cushioning, no emergency net, no quiet intervention disguised as compassion. What he faced now wasn't punishment. It was consequence. And that realization followed him far from London, across the ocean, into the sunlit calm of California, where the weight of independence finally settled in, heavy and unavoidable. Across the ocean, far from London's stone walls and coded language, the reality of the palace's decisions settled in quietly. Montecito looked unchanged. Blue skies, manicured hedges, calm streets. But inside the house, the mood shifted. Not dramatic, not explosive, just colder. This wasn't a headline problem anymore. It was a numbers problem. Meetings stretched late into the night. Advisors spoke carefully, choosing words that wouldn't ignite panic but couldn't hide truth either. Contracts were reviewed line by line. Obligations stacked up in black and white. Deadlines didn't move. Security costs didn't soften. The past didn't renegotiate itself. For the first time in his life, Harry was fully exposed. No institution behind him. No silent machinery absorbing risk. Independence, once framed as liberation, now felt sharp at the edges. It gave freedom, yes, but demanded payment in ways he had never had to consider before. Friends describe his emotional state as shifting rather than collapsing. Shock gave way to frustration. Frustration cooled into focus. There was anger, but it didn't last. There was bitterness, but it didn't dominate. What remained was something quieter and more dangerous: acceptance. Meghan, by contrast, moved with clarity. This wasn't her first encounter with instability. Long before royalty, she lived in an industry where relevance was temporary and income unpredictable. She didn't romanticize the moment. She interrogated it. What could be paused without signaling failure? What could be reduced quietly? What commitments no longer matched the reality they were living in? Her focus wasn't pride. It was endurance. Their children, their future, their ability to breathe without constant pressure. Sustainability replaced spectacle. Strategy replaced reaction. And slowly, a truth emerged that neither of them could avoid. The palace wasn't the enemy anymore. That fight was over. What stood in front of them now was arithmetic. Income versus expense. Image versus reality. Autonomy versus accountability. The kind of equation that doesn't care about backstory or intention. Outside their walls, the media sharpened the narrative. Some framed the palace's refusal as abandonment. Others praised it as long overdue discipline. Every silence was analyzed. Every absence treated as proof. But inside the house, the story was smaller and heavier. This wasn't about revenge or reconciliation. It was about adjustment. Harry had spent a lifetime cushioned by certainty. Now he was learning late what millions learn early: how much was once carried for you, and what happens when it stops. The lesson was brutal, but clarifying. No one was coming. What remained was what they could manage. There was no begging, no public plea, no dramatic performance. That would only weaken their position. Instead, decisions were made quietly. Appearances became selective. Commitments were trimmed. The tone shifted from declaration to discipline. The reported $100 million figure didn't disappear, but it changed meaning. It stopped being a threat and became a marker. The moment the waiting ended, the moment expectation died, freedom lost its romance here. What replaced it was responsibility, raw, unfiltered, unavoidable. For the palace, the outcome served a purpose. The message was unmistakable. Independence means consequences. Choice comes with cost. The institution would not bend to protect decisions made outside its structure. That clarity, however cold it appeared, reinforced the boundaries the monarchy believes it needs to survive in a modern world. Critics call it heartless. Supporters call it necessary. History will decide. For Harry, the reckoning reshaped his public image. The narrative drifted from victimhood to ownership, from escape to endurance. Freedom no longer looked heroic. It looked demanding. It asked questions. It removed excuses. Meghan's path also narrowed but sharpened. Without the constant shadow of royal comparison, her focus turned inward. Progress over performance. Longevity over flash. If success comes now, it won't be inherited. It will be built. What remains is not a tragedy or a triumph, but a recalibration. Family bonds still exist, but they're governed by principle, not protection. Emotion no longer overrides structure. The crown has drawn its line, and it does not move quietly or loudly. It simply holds. This story, stripped of drama, becomes something more universal. A man steps away from certainty and discovers the cost of standing alone. An institution chooses survival over sentiment. And independence, once glorified, reveals itself as demanding, relentless, and expensive. Even for Prince. And maybe especially for one